The best part of being sent to die is that nobody expects you to be on time. The grand terminus of the Concord High Spire was an architectural marvel of opulence and condescension. It was a space designed with the explicit purpose of making visiting species feel small, a cavernous cathedral of power that usually succeeded in its aim. Its impossibly high vaulted ceiling was a mosaic of captured nebulae, swirling with the slow, majestic light of distant galaxies. The floors, made of a polished obsidian-like composite, reflected this celestial grandeur in a perfect, disorienting mirror, giving arriving dignitaries the unnerving sensation of stepping into an infinite, star-dusted abyss. Today, however, its grandeur served only as a backdrop for a silent, galactic-scale awkwardness. A collection of the galaxy's most important beings, ambassadors, dignitaries, and military attachés from 100 worlds, stood in a state of suspended disbelief. There was the Ganal Trade Sovereign, a being of living coral whose symbiotic polyps gently pulsed with colors indicating deep confusion. Near him stood the twin envoys of the mythic cloud, their containment suits fogged by the agitated roiling of the ammonia-based gas within. A hulking Ursid legionnaire, whose species communicated primarily through controlled displays of aggression, was so still he might have been a statue carved from granite and fur. They were all here for the conclusion of a formality, a morbid bit of political theater. They had come to see the empty scout ship of the human challenger, Cadet Kevin Riley, or perhaps just a data logger confirming his atomization in the crucible of the endless core. They had come to witness the final, definitive proof that humanity, with its chaotic emotions and unpredictable nature, was not ready for the high table. They had come for a funeral, dressed for a diplomatic reception. What they got instead was Kevin Riley himself. He strolled out of the docking tunnel, his Terran Federation cadet uniform torn at the shoulder and flecked with a dust that glittered like trapped starlight. The fabric, once a crisp navy blue, was scuffed and stained, a testament to an ordeal no one had expected him to survive. He looked tired, bored, and distinctly unatomized. He raised a hand in a lazy, two-fingered wave to the stunned assembly, a gesture so casual it was a profound insult to the gravity of the occasion. At the front of the receiving party stood High Adjudicator Boroval of the Karad. He was a pillar of stony flesh and rigid tradition. His lower pair of arms, thick as mooring cables, were crossed over the intricate filigree of his chest plate, a gesture of unshakable finality. His upper pair, more slender and articulate, were clasped behind his back, the posture of a being who has never needed to defend himself. His face, a geological event of crags and crevices, was slowly tightening into a mask of pure, unadulterated confusion. Beside him, a stark contrast in her simple, elegant Terran suit, was Ambassador Tamora Bell. Her expression was a carefully constructed fortress of neutrality, a placid surface on a deep and turbulent ocean. She had prepared a dozen speeches, one of defiant sorrow, one of quiet dignity in the face of loss, one demanding an inquiry. She had not, in all her meticulous planning, prepared for this. The corner of her mouth twitched, a tiny, rebellious tremor that threatened to shatter her composure and bloom into a triumphant smile. A low thump echoed from the docking tunnel. It was not a sound so much as a pressure wave, a vibration that bypassed the ears and resonated deep in their bones. A shadow fell over Kevin, eclipsing the harsh, engineered light of the hangar. An immense energy field washed over them, a silent tide that caused the air to hum with a tangible charge. The hangar bay's lights, powered by the station's singularity core, flickered violently. The gravity plating beneath their feet groaned, dipping for a sickening moment with the sound of tortured metal before stabilizing. The station's klaxons, hardened systems designed to shriek bloody murder at the slightest provocation, let out a pathetic electronic cough and died. Their delicate diagnostic sensors, the first line of defense for the most advanced superstructure in the galaxy, were instantly and irrevocably fried by the sheer radiant power. Then, a head emerged from the docking tunnel's yawning maw. It was a head the size of a municipal shuttle, a geological titan of obsidian plates that seemed to drink the light, interwoven with veins of what looked like captured stardust nebulae. It was wolf-like in its general shape, with a long, elegant snout and ears that twitched with inquisitive energy, each one the size of a fighter craft. Its eyes were not lenses or organs, but twin novas of contained stellar fire, burning with an ancient, incomprehensible power that felt older than the stars themselves. The head lowered itself with a slowness that seemed to defy its own mass and nudged Kevin's shoulder. The contact was so soft, it was more a shift in air pressure than a physical touch, a gesture of affection from a being whose full form, Kevin knew, stretched nearly a kilometer long from snout to tail. Across the cavernous bay, 100 jaws belonging to 100 different species dropped in perfect, horrified unison. The sound of their collective shock was lost. In its place, a quiet so profound it felt like a physical weight descended on the hangar. The ambient hum of the station was gone. The whisper of the air recyclers was gone. All that remained was the low, internal thrum of the being before them, a sound felt in the teeth and bones. But the most spectacular sight of all was High Adjudicator Boroval. His stony face had cycled through confusion, disbelief, and was now landing squarely on a shade of apoplectic shock that was, for lack of a better word, priceless. His mouth worked, but no sound came out. The rigid pillar of Karad tradition looked as if he'd just been informed that gravity was now optional, and a new tax had been levied on breathing. Kevin patted the colossal snout. "Easy, boy," he murmured, his voice carrying with startling clarity in the unnatural quiet. "They get spooked easily." He looked up at the dumbstruck adjudicator. "Aye, adjudicator, ambassador. I'm back. Mission accomplished, I guess." We communed. The giant, star-dusted wolf thing let out a low, happy rumble, a sound that felt like the birth of a solar system, and licked Kevin's face, leaving a glittering trail of cosmic saliva on his cheek. "You used a forbidden Terran superweapon." Boroval's voice, having finally returned, was a booming roar that rattled the sterile sound-dampened walls of the conference room. He slammed a four-fingered hand on the polished white table, a surface cut from a single, flawless block of Corundian marble. "A psychic resonance cannon, a species enslavement device. This is an act of war." Kevin Riley leaned back in his chair, a piece of furniture clearly designed for a species with more knees than humans. It canted him forward at an awkward angle, but he made it look deliberate. He propped his scuffed boots on the edge of the table, an act of casual defiance that made Boroval's secondary optic sensors twitch in agitation. "Nope, don't have one of those. Pretty sure they're still in beta, and the marketing department is having a hell of a time with the name. Too many negative connotations."
"Then what is the meaning of this abomination?"
Boroval spat, gesturing wildly at the wall-sized view screen with one of his slender upper arms. The screen showed a live feed of the High Spire, a gleaming spindle of a station surrounded by a halo of docking rings and defense platforms. In a lazy orbit around this symbol of galactic order, the entity, formerly known only as the Guardian, was now contentedly chasing its own tail, a shimmering aurora of cosmic dust. The station's lights, visible even from this distance, continued to flicker erratically, a constant, galling reminder of the creature's disruptive presence. "The orders," Kevin said, inspecting a loose thread on his uniform cuff, "were to commune with the Guardian. I was supposed to achieve communion. The verb was quite specific, so I communed." He looked up, his expression one of perfect, deadpan innocence. "I'm a good listener. Apparently nobody in the last 10,000 years bothered to try listening. Everyone else showed up with capital ships, lance batteries, and a bad attitude. Turns out he's not a fan of that."
"He," Boroval sputtered.
the sound a dry rasp of incredulity.
It's a force of nature, a mindless weapon bound to the endless core by the founders themselves.
Yeah, about that, Kevin said, pulling his feet off the table and leaning forward, the chair groaning in protest. He says the binding was more of a long-term service contract with a ridiculously unfair non-compete clause. And he's not mindless. He's just been very, very bored. Also, his name isn't the Guardian. It's Boreas, but he prefers Spike. Ambassador Bell, who had been observing the exchange with the quiet focus of a predator watching its prey stumble into a snare, coughed into her hand. It was a masterfully executed maneuver, a textbook example of diplomatic discretion that completely failed to hide the smirk tugging at her lips.
Spike,
Boroval repeated, the word dripping with a venom so potent it felt like it could corrode the polished table.
You have named a sacred, ancient power of the galaxy. Spike?
It felt right, Kevin shrugged. He has a lot of spiky bits. It's descriptive.
This is an outrage, a profanity.
Boroval turned his furious gaze on Bell, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl that was a clear threat.
Ambassador, this cadet of yours has desecrated the ritual of communion. He has stole a fundamental asset of the Galactic Concord. You will order him to release the Guardian at once.
Tamora Bell's gaze was cool steel. Adjudicator, I believe you are misinterpreting the situation. Cadet Riley has not stolen anything. He has, by his account, made a friend. A very large, very powerful friend. As for the ritual, the Terran Federation was under the impression it was a test of character, of our species' ability to face the unknown with courage and grace. It would seem that Cadet Riley is passed with flying colors.
This is not over,
Boroval snarled, his craggy face darkening to the color of a stormy sky.
The Concord will not be made a fool by upstart primates and their pets.
He stormed out of the room, his guards scrambling to form a protective wedge around him, their heavy footfalls echoing his fury. The door hissed shut, leaving Kevin and Tamora alone. The room, which a moment ago had felt charged with anger, was now filled with a different kind of energy. The hum of the station's unsteady power grid was a constant, underlying thrum. Spike? Tamora finally asked, one perfectly sculpted eyebrow raised. He looks like a Spike, Kevin said defensively, a faint grin finally breaking through his weary facade. You did well, Cadet, she said, her professional mask finally dissolving into genuine, relieved warmth. The fortress of her composure lowered its drawbridge, and her eyes shone. Better than I could have possibly hoped. You were hoping I'd get him to follow me home like a lost puppy? I was hoping, she said, her eyes glinting with a fierce, dangerous pride, that you would do what you always do when faced with a stupid, pointless order from a self-important authority figure. Kevin's grin widened. Right. Piss them off and find a better way. Exactly, she confirmed. Her gaze softened for a moment, and Kevin felt a sudden, dizzying sense of vertigo. For a moment, he was back in the nothingness, the weight of that exact gamble, that one insane choice pressing down on him. The transition from hyperspace was like being ripped out of a dream. One moment, the serene, silent rush of faster-than-light travel, the universe reduced to elongated streaks of light against a black canvas. The next, a gut-wrenching lurch and a view that defied physics. The scout ship, officially designated the SC-1138, but which Kevin had christened the Don't Panic on a Dare, floated in the churning chaos of the endless core. It was less a place and more a wound in space-time, a nebula of violent, clashing colors swirling around a jagged black planetoid. The object at the center didn't reflect light, it seemed to consume it, a hole in reality so absolute it hurt the eyes to look at. The ship's sensor arrays screamed a cacophony of alarms and error messages flooding the small cockpit, and then he appeared. He didn't fly or warp in, he simply resolved. Out of the chaos of dust and radiation, a form coalesced. A kilometer-long titan of obsidian armor, roiling energy, and raw, untamed power. It let out a roar. The sound didn't travel through the vacuum. It was a psychic shockwave, a reality-bending growl that slammed into the Don't Panic and made every plate in the hull resonate with a pure cosmic rage that had been festering for millennia. Kevin's hands hovered over the controls, his pilot's instincts screaming at him to turn, to run, to engage the FTL drive and never look back. He could almost hear Adjudicator Boroval's pompous, droning voice from the pre-mission briefing.
A crucible in which the worthiness of a people is measured against the infinite. A great, profound honor.
A profound honor to be erased from existence by a living weapon. His mission orders glowed on a secondary screen, a single mocking word. Commune. His weapons were locked by Concord Command. His engines were capped at sublight speeds. Fighting was suicide. Fleeing was impossible. But then, another voice cut through his panic. A memory of Ambassador Bell in the departure corridor just before he boarded. Her gaze was sharp and calculating, her words precise. Your file is extensive, Cadet. 19 formal reprimands for creative insubordination. You once disabled a patrol drone with a well-aimed sandwich because its patrol route was inefficient. He'd almost been court-martialed for that sandwich. It had been a particularly dense rye. Now the future of his species was riding on a similar act of inspired stupidity. Don't do exactly what you're told. Her voice echoed in his memory, the real order hidden beneath the official ones, a whisper of rebellion in the face of certain death. Fighting was what they expected. Fleeing was what they expected. Adhering to the established procedure was the trap. So that left something else. Something stupid. Something no sane, decorated officer would ever attempt. Okay, Kevin said to the empty cockpit, the sound of his own voice a small comfort against the overwhelming presence outside. Plan C it is. He angled the Don't Panic not away from the monster, but toward the jagged black planetoid it was guarding. Landing was like trying to park a rowboat in a hurricane. Kevin wrestled with the controls, his knuckles white, as the Guardian watched his clumsy, spiraling descent. The creature's shuttle-sized head was cocked in what might have been confusion, or perhaps amusement. Finally, with a teeth-rattling crunch that sent shudders through the ship's frame, the landing struts found purchase on the black, glassy surface. He suited up, the familiar process a small island of normalcy in a sea of madness. He cycled the airlock, the hiss and clank of the machinery deafeningly loud in the silence, and then he stepped out into the silent chaos. The sky was a terrifying, beautiful vortex of incandescent rage, and floating in it, dwarfing everything, was the Guardian. Its nova bright eyes were fixed on him, a tiny, fragile figure in the vast, hostile landscape. Instead of a weapon, Kevin pulled out his survival kit's catalytic heater. He activated it, and a small, contained fusion reaction bloomed to life, a silent, flickering campfire of pure light and radiant heat in the oppressive emptiness. He sat down cross-legged before it and, feeling the immense weight of the Guardian's attention, started talking. It was for his own benefit, to fill the crushing silence, to remind himself that he was still there. So, Kevin began, his voice a dull thrum inside his own helmet, the words broadcast on a wide, open frequency. My name's Kevin, and my day is going just great. Woke up, had some nutrient paste that tasted like despair, and now I'm here, on a rock that eats light, about to be judged by you. The Guardian didn't move. It just watched. Kevin didn't know if the creature could hear him, or understand, or even cared. He just kept talking, a tiny pinprick of defiant life broadcasting his frustration and fear into the void. He complained about his superiors, the quality of the rations, the sheer mind-numbing stupidity of the mission. He talked about the time he hotwired a transport to win a bet, about the girl who broke his heart back on Titan, about his lingering disappointment that humanity had mastered star travel but still hadn't figured out how to make a decent cup of coffee. He was just a guy, venting to the universe. Then he pulled out a ration bar, a dense gray brick of compressed nutrients universally loathed by the officer corps. "Are you hungry?" he mumbled to himself. Then, on a whim, flicked it. The bar tumbled end over end through the low gravity, a pathetic, ridiculous offering to a god. It was an act of such profound, mundane absurdity that it sent a ripple through the psychic storm. The guardian, Boreas, who had endured the challenges of fleets and the prayers of zealots and the probes of scientists for 10,000 years, lowered its massive head. It wasn't the sound of Kevin's voice that had reached it across the vacuum. It was the raw, unfiltered emotion behind the broadcast monologue. Loneliness, sarcasm, a stubborn refusal to be afraid, and a deep-seated weariness that mirrored its own 10 millennia of solitude. Its Nova eyes tracked the tiny, tumbling object. With comical delicacy, it extended a tongue of pure, shimmering energy and licked the spot where the bar had landed, missing it entirely and vaporizing a 10-meter-wide patch of the glassy rock beneath. Kevin stared. The sheer, unexpected gentleness of the miscalculation was staggering. And then a laugh erupted out of him. It wasn't a sound wave, contained as it was within his helmet. It was a psychic burst of pure, unadulterated joy that cut through 10 millennia of grim, silent duty like a supernova. It was the most honest, unexpected thing Boreas had felt since its binding. The lonely millennia cracked. It let out a low, inquisitive rumble, not a roar, but a question. It was the first word in a conversation that had been waiting 10 millennia to begin. Back in the present, that conversation had become a full-blown political crisis. Spike, Boreas, had settled into a stable orbit around the high spire, refusing to leave Kevin's side, and his passive energy field, a constant low-level emission of reality-warping power, was a slow-acting poison to the station's intricate power grid. "The station's chief engineer has just submitted his latest report," Ambassador Bell announced to the tense high-table chamber, her voice cutting through the blustering of a florid gas-bag counselor. "He confirms that at the current rate of destabilization, the primary containment field for the station's singularity will begin to degrade in less than 72 hours. After that," she let the sentence hang in the air. A very, very small black hole opening up in the middle of the most populated structure in the galaxy was a powerful motivator for focused discussion.
"This is unacceptable,"
Boroval thundered, his lower hands clenching and unclenching.
"The human must command the beast to return to its post."
"He's not a beast, Adjudicator," Tamora said coolly, her gaze sweeping across the assembled faces of the council. "He is an individual who has made a choice, and his choice has implications for the Terran Federation's application to the High Table." The threat, unspoken but perfectly clear, settled over the room. "The Terran Federation's petition for full membership has been before you for 50 standard years," she continued, her voice resonating with quiet power. "We were told to prove our worth through your ritual. We have. The terms of our value to the Concord have just been renegotiated by a new party." As if on cue, a low, affectionate rumble vibrated through the station's hull. The lights in the chamber flickered dramatically. Several counselors flinched, their alien physiologies reacting in varied and telling ways. The Ursid Legionnaire's fur bristled, and the Silicon Delicate's shimmering form briefly lost cohesion.
"And if we refuse,"
Boroval snarled, his authority being challenged in a way it had never been before. Tamora Bell smiled, a rare and dangerous sight. "I'm not sure. Why don't you ask him?" Kevin's new diplomatic suite was palatial, a sprawling set of rooms that had last been used by a Hoolian monarch who required ceilings 40 meters high. but it came with responsibilities, namely, keeping his kilometer-long reality-bending friend entertained. "Spike, drop it! I said drop it!" Kevin yelled into the comm panel. On the main view screen, which took up an entire wall, Spike was gently nudging a Carvox cargo freighter with his nose. The freighter, a long, ugly vessel shaped like a rusty brick with engines tacked on as an afterthought, was spinning slowly, its crew likely having a collective species-wide panic attack. A low, playful growl rumbled back over the comms, a sound that made the fine china on a nearby table rattle a cheerful tune against its silver tray. "No, bad cosmic horror, that is not for you," Kevin said, adopting the tone one usually reserves for a puppy chewing on a favorite chew. "It's full of, space pigs or something. You won't like it. They're probably gamey. Drop the freighter." Spike whined, a sound like a solar flare being disappointed. But he backed away, giving the freighter a final, mournful nudge. The freighter's crew, wasting no time, hastily fired their thrusters and sped away as fast as their overburdened engines would allow. "There, see? All gone," Kevin said. "Okay, you dropped it. Who's a good boy? Who's the good primordial entity of unimaginable power? You are. Yes, you are a good boy." A happy, purr-like hum vibrated through the station, causing a fresh set of error messages to pop up on a nearby terminal. His personal comm chimed. It was Ambassador Bell. "Kevin, we're on. High table, now." "On my way," he said. Just had to stop Spike from adopting a freighter. There was a pause. "Try to keep him from playing with the infrastructure until after the vote, please," she said, her voice laced with dry amusement. "It makes the other counselors nervous." "That's kind of the point, isn't it?" "Just get down here, you menace," she said, and cut the connection. The atmosphere at the high table was even more charged than before. Tamora Bell had just laid out humanity's terms. Full membership, a permanent seat on the Security Council, and technological reparations for 50 years of being held at arm's length. It was audacious. It was brilliant.
"Preposterous,"
Boroval declared, his voice tight with fury. "Our demands reflect the new strategic reality," Tamora replied, her calm a stark contrast to his rage. A fussy silicon counselor, Delegate Sil 9, a being whose physical form was a shimmering column of silver thread-like filaments, vibrated with anxiety, producing a series of discordant chimes. "And what, pray tell, does such a creature even eat?" All eyes, from all the varied species in the room, turned to Kevin. He saw Tamora's subtle nod. This was his stage. He leaned into the microphone. "So far, he seems to like rocks," Kevin said, his voice flat and conversational. He gestured at the opulent marble walls of the chamber. "This station is very rocky. I see no problems with his long-term dietary needs here." A wave of panicked whispers swept the council. It was at that precise moment that the klaxons, the real ones this time, blared to life. Red alert lights bathed the room in a blood-red glow, strobing across the terrified faces of the assembled diplomats. "All hands, battle stations!" A frantic voice crackled over the comms. "Multiple unidentified vessels have jumped into the system. They are not responding to hails." On the main view screen, the serene image of Spike was replaced by a tactical map showing a cluster of angry red icons closing fast. "Destinations match the Carvox warlords," the officer reported, his voice strained. "A full marauder fleet, 20 cruisers, 3 dreadnoughts." Panic erupted. The Concord home fleet was weeks away, engaged in war games. The station's defenses were formidable but designed to repel a handful of raiders, not a full-scale invasion force. "How did they know to attack now?" a counselor shrieked. Boroval looked momentarily confused himself.
"They must have detected the Guardian's absence from the core."
"No," Tamora said, her eyes fixed on the map. "They're not that fast. Look at their vector. They're not just attacking the station, they're aiming for the power core." She looked at Kevin, her mind processing the variables with terrifying speed. They didn't detect his absence. They detected his presence. They saw the massive, unstable energy readings and thought the station's singularity was failing. They thought we were crippled. They were opportunistic vultures, drawn by the scent of chaos Spike himself had created. In the midst of the pandemonium, Tamora simply looked at Kevin. It wasn't an order. It wasn't even a suggestion. It was permission. Kevin grinned, a wide, feral, deeply human grin that was entirely out of place in the sterile, panic-filled room. He tapped the comm link on his wrist. "Spike," he said calmly, his voice cutting through the noise. "See the ugly ships, the pointy ones? Go get 'em, boy." Spike pounced. He crossed the distance from the station to the Carvox fleet in a single fluid bound that folded space-time around him. He let out a joyful, booming roar, a gravitational wave that tossed the pirate ships like leaves in a storm. He batted a dreadnought with a paw the size of a small moon. He nudged a cluster of cruisers together with his snout, their shields flaring and dying in an instant. He wasn't destroying them. He was disabling them. The strikes, while cosmically powerful, were delivered with a restraint that was almost gentle. The entire battle was over in 90 seconds. The once menacing fleet was now a single, silent, powerless clump of drifting scrap metal, its systems fried, its crews alive but utterly defeated. Spike let out a happy bark, a psychic shockwave of pure glee, and trotted back to his position orbiting the high spire. A voice, shaky with relief and awe, crackled over Tamora's private comm.
Ambassador, the Guardian's exertion, it's focused his energy field. The fluctuations have stabilized. The containment field is holding strong. I don't know how, but he's bought us time. The singularity is stable, for now.
In the high table chamber, the silence was profound. Kevin gave a cheerful thumbs up to the main view screen where Spike was now wagging his tail, a celestial aura of pure energy. "Good boy." Ambassador Tamora Bell turned back to the stunned council. Adjudicator Boroval looked physically ill, as if he'd swallowed poison. "Now," she said, her voice dropping into the echoing silence, "about our terms." High Adjudicator Boroval swept into his private chambers, his mind a cauldron of volcanic rage. Humiliated, outmaneuvered by a juvenile primate and its pet. Sentimentality. It was a disease, a corruption of the natural order that had served his people for centuries. He strode to a secure console, a black plinth that rose from the floor to meet his touch. His slender upper hands typed across the holographic interface, their movements economical as they partitioned command authorities. His heavier lower hands gripped the console's physical frame, as if he could impose his will on the station's very structure through brute force alone. A secure channel, shielded by layers of quantum-entangled encryption, opened to Kara Throne, the seat of his species' power.
The standing orders have failed, Boroval snarled, forgoing all pleasantries. The humans' chaotic empathy has corrupted a force of nature. It no longer recognizes its binding.
The voice that replied was ancient and toneless, a sound like stone grinding on stone, filtered through layers of processing. "The bindings are absolute. The Guardian cannot choose. It is a failsafe, not a being."
It has, Boroval spat. It is time to remind the creature of its true purpose. It is a tool, a weapon, not a pet.
He paused, his craggy features set in a mask of grim determination.
I am invoking Prime Mandate 9. I require the Dominance Engine. I will have it brought aboard under Kared diplomatic seal as cultural artifacts.
There was a long pause from the other end of the connection, a silence so profound it felt like a judgment. "Adjudicator, That artifact is a relic of the Unification Wars. It is brutal, unpredictable. Its use is forbidden, even by our own laws.
The consequences of inaction are already upon us, Boroval roared. The Terrans will use this creature to dismantle 1,000 years of our work. The order we have built. Send me the engine. Now.
The channel closed without another word. Boroval stood in the dim light of his chambers. He would not clear the bridge like a common thug. His plan would be elegant. It would be Karad. He would use the Concord's own regulations against it. He would put the leash back on the Guardian, and he would enjoy every moment of it. Kevin stood on the primary observation deck, looking out at Spike, who was dozing peacefully in orbit, a slow, gentle pulse of light moving through his vast form. The weight of it all, the sheer, crushing scale of what had happened, was settling on him. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't a master. He was just a guy who got lucky. "I have no idea what I'm doing, he said softly, his breath fogging the reinforced transparency of the immense window. "They all look at me like I'm some kind of beast master. I'm not. I just didn't want to die alone. And I figured you probably didn't either." As if sensing his thoughts, Spike stirred in his sleep. A low, soft hum vibrated, not through the station's hull, but deep inside Kevin's chest, a wave of pure, undiluted affection that settled his racing heart. It was a clear and simple message, a feeling that transcended language. "You are not alone. I am here." The bond was real, deeper than politics, stronger than fear. Kevin smiled, a genuine, tired smile that reached his eyes. "Yeah, I know, buddy. Thanks." The attack came with cunning, bureaucratic cruelty. On the command bridge of the High Spire, High Adjudicator Boroval stood calmly as his Karad technicians completed their work. The Dominance engine, smuggled aboard in pieces and assembled within the sealed Karad embassy, now sat near the main command console. It was a monument to coercion. Unlike the elegant, flowing lines of Concord technology, this device was all hostile angles and dissonant structure, jagged fins of a non-reflective black metal, a material that seemed to drink the ambient light, radiated from a central core. Within that core, conduits of a material resembling smoked quartz pulsed with a sickly, nauseating purple light, a venomous energy that seemed to move with a predatory crawl rather than a simple flow. The air around it grew cold, and a low subsonic frequency emanated from it, a vibration that felt like a threat whispered directly into the listener's brain. "All non-Karad command personnel are locked out," the technician reported, his voice devoid of emotion.
"Excellent,"
Boroval said. He had initiated a priority system-wide diagnostic, a Karad proprietary procedure that, for a 15-minute calibration period, gave him and his species exclusive command access from the bridge. To the rest of the station, it was a routine, high-level maintenance procedure. It was the perfect cover.
"Activate it,"
Boroval commanded, a cruel smile spreading across his craggy features.
"Let us remind our pet what it means to have a master."
The technician threw a switch. The engine screamed. It was not an audible sound, but a psychic shriek of pure, agonizing dominance that flooded the system, aimed directly at Boreas. In orbit, Spike cried out, his body convulsing in agony. He roared, a sound of pure pain that shook the High Spire to its foundations. Wild gravitational fluxes erupted from his thrashing form, and the station groaned, its internal gravity plating failing in cascades. Kevin felt it the instant it happened, a lance of pure, unadulterated agony through their bond. It was a pain so profound it dropped him to his knees. He doubled over, a strangled cry escaping his lips. "Spike!" He knew. with an absolute, chilling certainty. Who was behind this? He sprinted for the bridge. He skidded around the final corner and saw the corridor sealed by a heavy blast door, flanked by two of Boroval's personal guards, elite Karad sentinels, four-armed, armored behemoths. They wouldn't budge. Needed a distraction. Not a fire alarm. These were professionals, loyal to Boroval above all else. He needed something they couldn't ignore, something tied to their core programming. He ducked behind a support pillar, his fingers flying across his comm wristband. He pulled up a tactical schematic of Karad Guard comm systems, a file he'd acquired during a particularly boring lecture on interspecies security regulations at the Academy. He couldn't break their encryption, but he could spoof the source signature of a Karad command signal. He broadcast a single falsified message on their private tactical channel, his voice digitally altered to a clipped, official Karad tone. Code Ochre. Hostile biosignature detected. Diplomatic Vault 9. Standing orders demand primary guard response. Immediate. The two guards stiffened. Vault 9 held priceless Karad relics from the Unification Wars. Code Ochre was a top priority alert. Their orders were to guard the door, but their standing orders, drilled into them from birth, demanded they respond to the greater, specific threat to their heritage. They exchanged a look, a flicker of conflict in their multifaceted eyes, then broke formation, sprinting down the corridor toward the embassies. The moment they were gone, Kevin hit the emergency release on the blast door, sealing it behind him. He was on the bridge. He saw the pulsing artifact, Boroval at the controls, his face alight with triumphant cruelty. "Turn it off!" Kevin screamed, his voice raw.
Never, Boroval roared back. He will learn obedience.
Kevin knew he couldn't get to the engine in time. The Karad technicians were already moving to intercept him. So he did the only thing a desperate, outmatched man would think of. He launched himself at the master comm panel, shoving a surprised Karad technician aside and slamming his fist on the station-wide broadcast button. "Spike! Buddy! It's me, Kevin! Can you hear me? Listen to my voice!" he yelled, his voice cracking with desperation and the feedback of the psychic pain. "I know it hurts. I feel it. Boroval is trying to put the leash back on, but you're not his dog anymore. You hear me?" Tears streamed down his face from the psychic feedback, a river of shared agony. He poured every ounce of his friendship, his trust, his absurd, illogical affection into the words, broadcasting them into the void. "You're not a weapon! You're not a monster! You're my friend! You're a good boy! My good boy!" Kevin's desperate, heartfelt words were a beacon of warmth in a storm of psychic cold. My good boy. The words cut through the static and the pain and found their way to the core of Boreas's being. The thrashing stopped. Amidst the maelstrom of agony being inflicted upon him, Spike found his anchor. He focused. He gathered all the pain and rage being poured into him, not to be endured, but to be wielded. He turned it into a weapon. He unleashed a controlled, surgical blast of pure energy, a lance of starlight, thin as a needle, and just as sharp, shot out from his snout. It passed harmlessly through the station's shields, which were designed to stop kinetic and explosive force, not something so concentrated. It struck the Dominance engine dead center. The artifact detonated in a silent flash of purple light, its malevolent energy imploding. The psychic backlash was immense, washing over the bridge and throwing Boroval and his loyalists unconscious to the deck. The psychic shriek vanished. Outside, Spike let out a soft, tired rumble. He gently nudged the station's energy shield, a gesture of reassurance. He was weakened, drained. A new report flashed on Ambassador Bell's private datapad moments later. "His energy output has dropped significantly," the chief engineer wrote, his text laced with awe. "The field is still there, but it's quiet. It no longer interferes with the station's systems. The singularity is safe." The ticking clock was finally, definitively off. The aftermath was swift, Boroval and his co-conspirators were arrested for high treason. The evidence, broadcast live to the entire station by a quick-thinking human cadet, was irrefutable. The rest of the Concord Council, having witnessed definitive proof of both the human guardian bond and Boroval's treachery, was humbled. When Ambassador Bell next stood before the high table, she didn't even need to ask. The motion to grant the Terran Federation full membership was passed unanimously. Weeks later, Kevin Riley stood on the bridge of the TFS Problem Child. He wore a sharp new uniform that felt a little too stiff, the fabric not yet broken in. His new rank insignia glittered on his collar. His official title, which he found endlessly amusing, was Special Envoy to the Guardian. Ambassador Bell stood beside him, watching Spike pace their ship through the deep black between stars. He moved with a newfound confidence, a loyal cosmic guardian, no longer bound by duty, but by choice. "So," Tamora asked, a rare, relaxed smile on her face. "First order of business for the Federation's newest and most influential diplomat in this new era of galactic peace?" Kevin grinned, his eyes fixed on his friend, a kilometer-long shadow against the distant star field. "I'm going to teach him to roll over." Tamora laughed, a genuine hearty sound that echoed on the quiet bridge. "And how do you plan to do that?" "No idea," Kevin admitted cheerfully. "But it's going to be great." He gave a mental nudge, a silent command of pure affection, a feeling of playfulness and adventure. Spike responded with a joyful, space-bending wiggle, a gesture so vast it subtly warped the starlight around them. "All right, buddy," Kevin murmured, turning to the captain. "Let's go find some trouble." The captain nodded, a smile on his own face. "Engage FTL drive." The stars stretched into long lines of light, and the TFS Problem Child, along with its kilometer-long star-dusted dog, leaped into hyperspace, off to a brand new adventure.